The Vikings could be vicious, but someone with a few brains could beat them. After raiding for 50 years, they came back with armies and started a real invasion with big battles against the Saxons. But there are some battles the Vikings would rather forget, like the Battle of Ashdown near Reading in April 871 AD. They came across a new Saxon star scrapper. If there'd been newspapers around at the time, the story would have read something like this.
Young royal leads rout at Reading. Alfred makes pastry out of Danish Vikings.
The Saxons of Wessex washed their swords in Viking blood last night to celebrate a vital victory, and the surprise star of the battle was ex-King Athelwulf's youngest son, Alfred. Young Alfred showed his big brother Athelred how to give the Danes a drubbing. The young Wessex wonder was meant to lead half of the Saxon swordsmen, while Athelred was to lead the rest. Imagine the popular prince's surprise when he went to King Athelred's tent and found his brother praying. "There's a battle to be fought out there, brother," Alf argued. "I serve God first and men second," the crazy king replied. So brave Alf decided to go it alone. The Danes were favourites in the fight. They held the high ground, but awesome Alf went at them like a wild boar, one witness raved. The blood-stained battle raged around a single stunted thorn bush. Saxons and Danes swapped places as both tried to hold that hilly height. At last, the sword-swinging Saxons drove the desperate Danes back to their camp till darkness stopped the slaughter. The Wessex Star newspaper says, "Move over Athelstan, let's make Kid Alfred King Alfred." The Wessex Star's own poet wrote this ode to the great victory. Ode to Alf, who cuts Vikings in half. Our Alfie's the hero of Reading, for he jumped like a flea from his bedding. While King Athelred prayed, good King Alfred just slayed, till the Danes were left bleeding and deading. Oh, awful Athelred died soon after the battle, and Prince Alfred went on to become King Alfred the Great, and stopped the Danish Vikings from taking over the whole country. The Vikings needed a break from all the fighting and robbing and being beaten by the Saxons. They didn't have books to read or television to watch. Instead, they had stories. Stories from the start of the world to the end. And of course, being Viking stories, they were really horrible. In fact, horrible enough to give you nightmares. If you're easily scared, then switch off now. Right? For the brave ones still switched on, here is the savage story of Loki. Once upon a time, there was a god called Loki. Now, Loki was an evil god who caused a lot of trouble among the other gods. He was an absolute nuisance, just like a little brother or sister. He was also very jealous and spiteful. He was so sly, he once had a bet with Brock, the chief dwarf, and the bet said that if Loki lost, he would lose his head. Loki lost. Oops. But when Brock came to take his head, Loki said, "Hang on, the bet said you could take my head, but not my neck. You mustn't touch my neck." Of course, Brock couldn't take Loki's head without touching his neck, so Loki escaped with his life. But the dwarfs got their revenge by sewing his lips together. The story doesn't end there, though. Loki went on with his evil tricks. He gave the god called Hod some mistletoe berries. Hod was blind and couldn't see what he was eating. The mistletoe was poisoned and he died. This time he'd gone too far. The gods tied him to a tree and left him there forever. He's probably still there now. You'll recognise him if you see him tied to a tree. He'll be crying, "I'm Loki, set me free!" Except he had his lips sewn together, so he'll be crying, Don't think the Vikings invaded England and Scotland. Ireland and Wales then stopped. The great Viking Eric the Red sailed to America 500 years before Christopher Columbus. They went to Russia, and they sailed all the way to Italy. Italy? What was there? Well, the Viking war chief Hasstein had heard all about the riches of the city of Rome and set off to rob it with his captain Ubi. But the Vikings remembered some old Viking wisdom. The Vikings used to say, "Even the man with no hands can look after sheep." In other words, a corpse was no good to anyone. If they were going to attack Rome, then they needed a plan that would let them win, but without risking their lives. Hasstein and Ubbi sailed into the Mediterranean, the first Vikings to go that far south, and they came across a city of gleaming white marble. Hasstein was amazed. "Rome," he breathed, "the greatest city in the world, but we'll never take it alive." His friend Ubbi said, "And a corpse is no good to anyone." Hasstein slapped him on the back. He was delighted. "Great idea, Ubbi. Get me a coffin. I have a plan." And Hasstein explained the clever plan to Ubbi. The next day, the Vikings landed peacefully, and Ubbi went to the gates of the city and asked to see the bishop. He told a bit of a lie. "My leader, Hasstein, is old and sick." The bishop was upset. "Poor man. Can we help?" "Yes," Ubbi said. "You can christen him before he dies. He's always wanted to become a Christian, but he's never found the time or the bishop willing to christen him." The bishop was glad to help, so Hasstein was carried ashore. The bishop blessed him, then christened him by smearing the Viking leader with holy ointment and oil. Hasstein cried out how happy he was. "Now I can die a happy man. Sticky and greasy, but happy." And the next day, Ubbi returned with a sad message. "Sorry, Bish, but Hastein's hopped the twig." "Hopped the twig?" "Turned up his toes, kicked the bucket, and sailed his last longboat. Shot his last elk, ate his last whelk, pillaged his last... He's dead." "I'm so sorry, my son," the bishop sighed. "I don't suppose," Ubbi said, "I don't suppose you'd bury him like a good Christian inside your cathedral, would you?" "Of course, my son. Box him up and bring him in." So the Vikings carried the coffin in through the city gates, through the massive city walls, past the guards, but just before the body was laid to rest, Hasstein jumped out of his coffin. "Fool, you Christian clots! Right, men, massacre them!" Hasstein held a sword to the throat of the bishop and demanded, "Now, hand over the keys of Rome!" And the bishop gave a surprising answer. "Rome? Rome? This isn't Rome. This is the city of Luna, hundreds of miles from Rome." And Hasstein said, "Oops, sorry." Then Ubbi asked his leader, "What do we do now, boss?" And horrible Hasstein ordered, "Oh, massacre them anyway." And that's what the Vikings did. Some say this story isn't true, and no Viking remains have been found in Luna. Who knows? Hasstein did attack towns in Italy, but never reached Rome. But we can be pretty sure horrible Hasstein was a vicious Viking. Meanwhile, back in Britain, the Viking King Canute ruled the whole of England, and he was a great king. So, how come the Vikings don't rule to this day? Because the truth is their enemies, the Saxons, were even more savage. The murder of Prince Alfred in 1036 was a little bit nasty. Poor little Alfie just wanted to be king after the Danish King Canute died. But Earl Godwin, Saxon Earl of Wessex, had other ideas. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle reported this story of little Alfie's eyes. Prince Alfred was a cheerful lad with eyes of sparkling blue, till Godwin had his eyes put out, yes both, not one, but two. He sent the blinded prince away to be a monk in Ely, and there the little Alfie died. Did Godwin care? Not really. Then Godwin set about the slaying of little Alfie's friends. He had them caught and had them brought to really sticky ends. Some he sold as slaves for cash, and some he scalped their head. Others he locked up in chains, and some he killed, stone dead. Some he had a hand chopped off, or arm, or leg, or ear. No wonder they all ran away, all gibbering in fear. We've never seen a crueler deed been done in all these lands, since Godwin met with Alf and left with blood upon his hands. The Saxons believed that God took revenge on evildoers. An eye for an eye, the Bible said. So they'd be pleased to know that Godwin's son, Harold, died at the Battle of Hastings 30 years later with an arrow in his eye. and that was the end of the gruesome Godwins. The Viking Age was ended, and the last Viking was gone. Or was he? Because in a roundabout way, the vicious Vikings had won in the end. First, they conquered northern France, where they were known as Northmen or Norman. Then the Norman, William the Conqueror, invaded Britain and won. So, if the Normans were Vikings, then the Vikings conquered England. We hope you enjoyed learning about the despicable goings-on of our ancestors as much as we did when we made these CDs. Don't forget to watch out for other CD audiobooks on special packs of Kellogg cereals. You can learn about the rotten Romans, the measly Middle Ages, the vile Victorians, incredible Ireland, and the terrible Tudors. Look for the whole horrible lot.
Horrible Histories are written and read by Terry Deary and produced by Nick Baker for Testbed Productions. Original music is by Danny Fromaggio, sound design by Dirk Maggs. Horrible Histories are published by Scholastic Children's Books. And they're really horrible!